They asked for $2.50. Then they grinned and asked Hannah to drive to her own death. The university student who once gave up her birthday party to feed hungry children begged for mercy as they took turns assaulting her before crushing her skull with a 38-kilogram rock in a vineyard. Her best friend Cheslin, left for dead with a fractured skull, crawled away laughing. While Hannah's body lay broken among the vines, her killers continued their spree in their blue Volkswagen, robbing, kidnapping, and withdrawing cash. In court, they smiled and gave thumbs up to the cameras. Within a year, her mother was dead. Her father soon followed. What on earth could Hannah have done to deserve this? And why were her depraved killers still on the streets when this shocking crime happened? This is the heartbreaking case of Hannah Cornelius. Some people radiate kindness. Hannah Cornelius was one of them. Born on February 12, 1996 to Willem and Anna Cornelius, Hannah grew up in a home where compassion wasn't just taught, it was lived. Her father was a magistrate and her mother a lawyer. And they had all the means to become that rich, arrogant family trope, but they never did. In fact, they saw themselves as lucky. If we have this kind of money, we should do some good in the world, they kept saying. And Hannah picked this up right away. For her 16th birthday, she refused presents. Instead, she packed gifts for children in a nearby informal settlement. It wasn't a one-time gesture. Year after year, Hannah's birthdays became opportunities to give rather than receive. When she enrolled at Stellenbosch University, a prestigious institution nestled among South Africa's sprawling vineyards, her parents hoped she might follow them into law. Hannah had other plans. Hannah chose to study humanities instead, majoring in languages, literature, and philosophy. She played piano like a virtuoso, excelled in drama, and still found time to volunteer at an animal sanctuary in Cape Town. She was protective of her younger brother, who faced learning difficulties and was later diagnosed with autism. While other teenagers might have been embarrassed by a sibling who needed extra help, Hannah stepped up, becoming his fiercest defender and gentlest guide. Her high school boyfriend, Finello Arns, who would later tell journalists he knew that he wanted to marry Hannah the moment he saw her. She was unmaterialistic and authentic in ways that made her stand out in a world obsessed with appearances. These details might sound redundant, but they're not. Hannah's unusual kindness is what makes this case truly stomach-turning. This is who they tortured. This is who they killed. How do the absolute worst things happen to the best of people? There is no logic to it, no fairness, no justice, just the sickening reality that Hannah's compassion led her into darkness no human deserves. May 26, 2017 began like any Friday night for Hannah and her friend Cheslin Marsh. Nothing about that Friday night stood out, just the usual stuff. Laughs, drinks, a game of dominoes. When the night started winding down after midnight, they decided to call it. But at that hour, Cheslin knew the vibe in Stellenbosch could change for the worse, so being the good friend that he was, he offered to walk Hannah back to her place. But then Hannah had a similar thought. What about Cheslin's safety? He'd now have to walk back himself at 3 a.m. from her dorm room to his. He didn't have to, she figured. Her grandmother's blue and white Volkswagen was right there. Cheslin tried telling her he'd be fine cruising home on his longboard, but Hannah wouldn't have it. That was just her way, always looking out for others. "I'll drive you," she said. This simple act of kindness, this refusal to let a friend risk his safety, would cost Hannah everything. At 3:23 a.m., surveillance cameras captured Hannah's Volkswagen pulling up near Cheslin's residence. They parked on a small patch of grass, chatting, unaware of the four men walking by. The CCTV footage is haunting. Hannah and Cheslin sat in the car, talking. Outside, four figures circle back, eyeing the vehicle. Then they walk past the car, but they don't go away. They hide behind a nearby truck, waiting. And then, in one violent moment, they strike. A man shoves his hand through Hannah's window, pointing a screwdriver at her chest. Another approaches Cheslin's side with a knife. Two more appear at the back of the car. For 15 terrifying minutes, Hannah and Cheslin sit trapped as the men search for the car keys. Hannah, trying to protect her grandmother's beloved car, had hidden them. But when the men threatened her life, she surrendered. "Take everything," she pleaded. "Just leave the car. It's my grandmother's." They took their phones and wallets. Hannah didn't have anything on her. Inside Cheslin's wallet, they found 40 rand. That's $2.50. Perhaps that's what made them angrier. Or perhaps they were monsters out to kill, and nothing could have stopped what followed. The four men were Vernon Whitboy, Geraldo Parsons, Eben von Nikirk, and Nashville Julius. The last would leave with Cheslin's phone and the 40 rand. The other three would subject Hannah and Cheslin to hours of unimaginable horror. The men drove Hannah's car out of Stellenbosch, with Hannah wedged between Whitboy and Parsons in the front seat, and Cheslin trapped in the back with Van Niekerk. At some point, they forced Cheslin into the trunk, taking his shoes and jacket. Hannah remained alone in the car with the three men, staring straight ahead, trying to stay calm and compliant. At 4:34 a.m., surveillance cameras captured the car at the petrol station. Whitboy attempted to withdraw money from Cheslin's account using his bank card, but the PIN number was incorrect. Cheslin had given them the wrong number, a decision that would nearly cost him his life. For the next hour, the men drove around making drug pickups and drop-offs, and Hannah remained silent, terrified as these strangers discussed her fate as if she weren't there. At 5:30 a.m., they stopped on the outskirts of Kraftorian. They told Hannah that they were just taking a cigarette break, that they'd return her car soon and let her go. It was a lie. Two men pulled Cheslin from the trunk and forced him to walk into the bushes. They made him lie face down on the ground. Cheslin knew what was coming. He would testify, "They were taking me into the bushes, and then they told me I should lay my head on a piece of brick. And that's when I realized these people are going to take my life away. And as I was laying on the brick, I closed my eyes and prayed and asked the Lord for forgiveness for whatever I did in this life." They smashed bricks into his head repeatedly until he lost consciousness. They left him for dead. Back in the car, Hannah asked what happened to Cheslin. They told her that they'd tied him up. She believed them. What happened next wasn't just violence. It was horror, unfiltered and raw. They drove Hannah to an abandoned paintball facility. No witnesses, no help. There, they took turns assaulting her, one after another. Men who saw her not as a human, but something to use and discard. Hannah, terrified beyond imagination, made a devastating calculation. "Don't fight, don't scream, promise anything. I won't tell anyone," she begged them. "Just let me live." She bargained with monsters using the only currency she had left, her silence, a brutal choice that no human should ever have to make. They took what they wanted anyway, and then they lied about letting her go. They drove to a vineyard, and Hannah was now in the trunk. When they opened it, she refused to get out. She knew their promises meant nothing. She clung to the car in desperation. One of the men stabbed her neck with the screwdriver. They then pulled her out, threw her onto the gravel, and found a 40-kilogram rock. With one crushing blow, they ended the life of Hannah Cornelius. It was not yet noon on May 27th. Hannah had endured approximately 8 hours of captivity, terror, and violence before her death. But the men were not finished. They drove away in Hannah's car and continued their spree, attacking 2 more women that same day. They robbed and kidnapped another, forcing her into Hannah's car, while they withdrew 3,000 rand from her account. Their expressions on the ATM security camera were chilling, calm, smiling, unbothered, as if they hadn't just murdered a young woman hours before. While Hannah lay in a vineyard, dead, Cheslin Marsh was fighting for his life. Despite catastrophic head injuries, he regained consciousness. Dazed and covered in blood, he began to walk. He had no shoes, glass was coming into his feet with every step, and his skull was fractured. His brain was bleeding. One ear would never hear again. But he walked. He climbed over walls, stumbled through fields, and finally reached a home where a couple spotted him. At first, they were shocked and afraid. This looked like a scene from a horror movie, but his desperate pleas convinced them to call for help. At the hospital, Cheslin told police everything he could remember. He described the attackers, the car, the abduction. He asked about Hannah. praying that she had been found alive, but Hannah was already gone. 2 pump technicians had discovered her body earlier that morning. They'd been working on a farm in Stellenbosch and had placed a large rock over a hole that they'd dug. When they returned, they found the rock had been moved. Nearby, Hannah lay partially clothed and motionless. The rock that had covered their hole had been used to crush her skull. The search for Hannah's killers intensified. By 2 p.m. on May 28th, just 24 hours after the abduction, undercover officers spotted Hannah's distinctive blue Volkswagen. They followed it and called for backup. A high-speed chase ensued, ending when the car was cornered at a private farm. Whitboy and Parsons tried to escape on foot, one even jumping into a creek, but both were quickly caught. During questioning, they did what narcissistic, psychopathic killers do. They pointed their fingers at each other. It wasn't me, it was my friend. But police knew better than to believe them. Within days, all 4 men were in custody. The swift arrests should have been consoling to Hannah's family. Justice would be served, but nothing could bring back their daughter or ease the unbearable weight of their grief. Hannah's family would wither out one by one. Who were these men who snuffed out Hannah's bright future with such casual cruelty? Vernon Whitboy began his criminal career at just 13. By 15, he had more than 10 convictions for theft, housebreaking, and robbery. Geraldo Parsons and Eben van Niekerk had similar histories. But before Hannah's murder, none had been convicted of SA or homicide. This was an escalation, the terrifying progression of men who had become desensitized to violence and indifferent to human suffering. The tattoos that covered Whitboy and Parsons told a dark story. They bore the markings of the 28s, a notorious prison gang operating in Western Cape. Known as the Soldier Gang, the 28s are responsible for fighting and killing within the prison hierarchy. Images of naked women and phrases like thirsty for blood decorated their skin. Visual evidence of their allegiance to a culture that glorifies violence and dehumanizes women. The Numbers Gang promotes a deeply misogynistic worldview where women are objects to be used and discarded. Sexual violence is commonplace, with female bodies sometimes treated as currency within the prison system. This explains, but does not excuse, how these men could do this. In the heartbreaking words of Cheslyn's mom, and their attitude in court was even more sickening. In their confessions, each man tried to minimize his own role while blaming the others. Vernon Whitboy claimed that he was only there for the money and didn't participate in the SA or the murder. Geraldo Parsons admitted to violating Hannah, but said he felt bad only because he betrayed his family. He had a girlfriend and 2 children, not because of what he'd done to Hannah. Eben van Niekerk wrote an apology letter to Hannah's parents, claiming he was afraid of the other men and acted under pressure. So, yeah. Not an apology, just an excuse, seemingly written by a toddler. In court, he doubled down. Niekerk denied writing the letter, honestly saying authorities forced him to write it as a confession. Their behavior during the trial left Hannah and Cheslyn's families crying and feeling nauseous. They smiled, laughed, and joked throughout the proceedings, showing not a shred of remorse for the lives that they had destroyed. When asked if they felt sorry for what they had done, they gave vague, self-serving answers.
Gerald, do you want to say anything?
Wat wil jy sê? Ja, ek sien maar. Is hulle bly oor wat die uitspraak was hierso? Moet dit maar accept. En ek het as ek probeer. Is 'n bietjie laat. Ja.
These were not guys who made some drunken mistake or lost control for a moment. No, these were hunters, predators who spotted weakness and pounced. Men who decided that Hannah's entire existence, her dreams, her future, everything she was and could have been, was worth less than some cash and a car. But here's the gut punch we need to swallow. These monsters weren't born monsters. They were built piece by piece in South Africa's broken machine. Poverty, violence, prison yards instead of schoolyards, gang tattoos instead of diplomas. Does understanding this excuse what they did? Not for a second. But if we only see 4 evil men and not the factory that produced them, we're missing something crucial. We're guaranteeing more Hannahs, more grieving families, more courtrooms filled with smirking killers who never learned that human life matters. In October 2018, the trial began. The evidence against the accused was overwhelming. Surveillance footage, forensic evidence, Cheslin's testimony, and confessions from Whitboy and Parsons. The 40-kilogram rock used to kill Hannah was brought into the courtroom, a stark physical reminder of the brutality of her death. Cheslin took the stand facing his attackers directly. Despite his trauma, he testified clearly and powerfully about that horrific night. His family sat in the gallery as he relived the worst moments of his life. They could hardly contain their tears. After weeks of testimony, the verdict was delivered. Vernon Whitboy, Geraldo Parsons, and Eben Van Niekerk were found guilty of murder, rape, kidnapping, and robbery. They were each sentenced to life in prison. Nashville Julius, who had participated only in the initial kidnapping and robbery, received 15 years.
On count 6 of Hannah Cornelius, accused 1, is sentenced to life imprisonment.
Yeah, that's all the people in the gallery cheering for Hannah, but nothing was the same for her family. In fact, Hannah's mother, Anna, was not even there that day. In March 2018, she'd walked into the ocean and didn't return. Those are her grieving husband's words. The family, who are survivors, her father said during his impact statement, live in the ruins of what was once a family. Hannah's death shattered them beyond repair. Her mother, Anna, had become a shadow of herself, William said. Inconsolable, frantic, almost manic in everything she did. I do not believe that she committed suicide, he said, but what I do believe is that she did not have the physical or mental strength left to counter any difficulties that she may have experienced. She had, in his words, given up on life, unable to bear the weight of her daughter's brutal death. Hannah's younger brother couldn't grasp the finality of his sister's absence either. Every single night, he would stop in front of a framed photograph of Hannah and ask his dad when she was coming home. Willem said in court, "This has now been going on every night for a year and a half." Hannah's brother had to be moved to a psychiatric facility. In 2022, Willem also passed away after battling cancer. Those who knew him said his broken heart contributed to his decline. Hannah's death had literally turned her family to dust. Yet amid this overwhelming tragedy, there were small glimmers of resilience and hope. Cheslin Marsh, after taking time off to recover, now returned to his studies. He switched from theology to law, determined to help other victims of violent crimes. Through a fundraiser organized by Hannah Cornelius Foundation, he received a hearing aid to compensate for the deafness caused by the attack. The Hannah Cornelius Foundation, established by her family, continues to work in underprivileged communities, helping vulnerable youth through education, counseling, and guidance. On what would have been Hannah's birthdays, the foundation distributes gift packs to children in Ocean View, carrying on her tradition of giving. These small acts of kindness cannot undo the horror of what happened. They cannot bring Hannah back or heal the wounds left by her absence, but they ensure that her legacy is not defined solely by the violence that ended her life, but also by the compassion that defined how she lived it. Hannah's story is not just a personal tragedy. It's a mirror reflecting deeper societal factors. In South Africa, approximately 8 women are killed by men every day, a rate 5 times higher than the global average. In 2017, about 138 per 100,000 women were estimated. That's the highest rate in the world. Research found that 40% of South African men admitted to hitting female partners, and 1 in 4 admitted to committing SA. Yet those numbers are only part of the story. Only 8% of SA cases result in conviction, and many victims never even report their attacks, too afraid of retaliation. Imagine that, to not be able to ask for any justice because you're too afraid of the perpetrator. The gangs that claimed these lives weren't born in a vacuum. They grow like weeds through the cracks of broken societies where poverty, failing schools, and desperation create perfect breeding grounds for violence. Behind prison walls, the numbers gang doesn't rehabilitate. It graduates more efficient predators. Men enter as petty criminals and emerge as something worse. But let us be crystal clear. Understanding is not excusing. These men chose. They decided Hannah's life meant nothing. That responsibility is theirs alone. Yet, if we only punish individuals while ignoring the system, we're just treating symptoms while the disease spreads. More Hannahs will die, more mothers will walk into oceans, more fathers will waste away from grief. Real change demands more. Better schools in forgotten neighborhoods, jobs that offer dignity instead of depression, prisons that heal instead of harden, and a culture that sees women as humans, not targets. Hannah was everything that these men weren't. Kind, thoughtful, selfless to her core. The girl who always gave away her birthday presents ended up buried because she offered a friend a ride home. The crushing unfairness of this could break you if you let it sink in fully. We can't make sense of Hannah's murder because senseless cruelty was its very point. It represented humanity's darkest impulse, destruction without purpose. But Hannah showed us something else, that even in a brutal world, compassion remains possible, that giving matters more than taking. Her legacy isn't just grief, it's the foundation bearing her name. It's Cheslin studying law to protect others. It's everyone who hears her story and decides to fight for a better world. Not just a safer world, a world worthy of Hannah Cornelius, where kindness isn't punished and where birthdays are celebrated rather than memorials, and where families stay whole. A world where someone like Hannah gets to grow old. Hannah trusted 4 strangers with her life. They repaid her with unimaginable cruelty. Would you have done what Hannah did? Driven a friend home despite the risk? Should we teach young women to be less trusting in a world where kindness can be a death sentence? Or does that let the monsters win twice? Share your thoughts below. This conversation matters not just for Hannah's memory, but for every young person making split-second decisions at 3 a.m. If this case affected you, hit like and subscribe. The stories that break our hearts are the ones we need to tell the most. Click on that next video screen and make sure to return for our next investigation. See you soon and stay safe.